Let me tell you what happened to me last Tuesday night. My name is Martha and I'm 42 years old. I've been a single mother for 18 years, raising 3 kids after their father walked out when my youngest was born. That evening I was standing in my kitchen making their favorite dinner, honey garlic chicken with mac and cheese, when I heard voices drifting from the living room. My 15-year-old son Marcus was talking to his sisters, 13-year-old Tiana and 17-year-old Jasmine. "Mom's just our personal ATM," he said, and they all burst out laughing. "She'll give us whatever we want. Did you see how fast she bought us those new iPhones last week?" I froze, my hands still holding the wooden spoon I'd been stirring with. The chicken sizzled in the pan, but I couldn't move. Jasmine's voice cut through the air like a knife. "She's so desperate for us to love her. We could ask for a car tomorrow and she'd buy it." Tiana giggled. "Yeah, she works like a slave just to spoil us and we don't even have to be nice to her. Remember when I called her stupid for not understanding my math homework? She still bought me those designer boots the next day." Standing there in that kitchen surrounded by the smell of their favorite meal, I felt something inside me break. 18 years of sacrifice, of working 2 jobs, of going without so they could have everything I never had as a child. And this was what they really thought of me. The wooden spoon clattered to the floor as my hands began shaking. I pressed my back against the refrigerator trying to process what I'd just heard. These were the children I'd given my entire adult life to. The children I'd worked 16-hour days for, skipping meals so they could eat at the fancy restaurants their friends went to. I thought back to just last month when I'd emptied my savings account, again, to pay for their spring break trip to Miami. $3,000 I didn't have, money I'd planned to use for the roof repair that was desperately needed. Instead, I'd taken on extra shifts at both my jobs, cleaning offices until midnight and then getting up at 5 a.m. to work at the hospital cafeteria. My mind flashed to all the times I'd apologized to them. When Marcus wanted those expensive basketball shoes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, I'd said sorry for not having the money immediately available. When Jasmine demanded a designer homecoming dress, I'd worked overtime for 3 weeks straight and still felt guilty it took me so long to afford it. The conversation in the living room continued. "Remember when she couldn't afford to fix her car last year?" Tiana was saying. "But she still managed to get us all the latest gaming consoles for Christmas. She had to take the bus to work for like 3 months." "That was so embarrassing," Marcus replied. "Good thing none of my friends saw her getting off that bus." I slid down the refrigerator door until I was sitting on the cold kitchen floor, my uniform from the hospital still smelling like industrial cleaner. Sitting on that kitchen floor, the memories flooded back like a dam had burst. I remembered the night Jasmine was born, how I'd held her tiny hand and promised I'd give her everything I never had. I was 25 then, young and naive, thinking love and sacrifice were the same thing. I remembered working through pneumonia when Marcus was 8 because I couldn't afford to take sick days. He'd needed new school clothes and the other kids were teasing him about his worn-out shoes. I'd dragged myself to both jobs with a fever of 102, collapsing in the parking lot of the office building I cleaned. The time Tiana wanted to join the cheerleading squad, but the uniform and fees cost $800. I'd sold my grandmother's jewelry, the only valuable thing I owned, and told Tiana I'd been saving up for months. She'd barely thanked me, more concerned about whether the uniform fit properly. Last Christmas, I'd worked every holiday shift available, missing our family dinner to earn enough for their gifts. When I finally came home at midnight on Christmas Day, exhausted and reeking of kitchen grease, they'd already opened everything and were complaining that Marcus's gaming headset wasn't the exact model he'd wanted. I thought about my own childhood, growing up with a mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. I'd sworn my children would never feel that struggle, never know what it was like to want for anything. But somewhere along the way my love had become enabling, and their gratitude had become entitlement. "She's probably going to ask us to help with dinner soon," Jasmine's voice drifted in. "Should we pretend we didn't hear her?" I pulled myself up from the floor, my joints aching from the double shifts I'd been pulling lately. The honey garlic chicken was burning, filling the kitchen with smoke, but I didn't care. I turned off the stove and stood there, staring at the expensive ingredients I'd bought with money I should have spent on my own needs. Walking quietly to the doorway between the kitchen and living room, I peered around the corner. There they were, my 3 children, sprawled across the leather sectional I'd bought them last year. Each of them had their new iPhones in their hands, wearing the designer clothes I'd purchased just days ago. Jasmine was wearing the $200 sneakers she'd convinced me were essential for her social life. I can't believe she fell for the, but Mom, everyone else has one thing again, Marcus was saying, waving his phone. Works every time. She's so gullible, Tiana added, not looking up from her screen. Remember when I told her I was being bullied because of my old backpack? She bought me that designer one the next day and I wasn't even being bullied. Jasmine snorted. The best part is how she always apologizes to us when she can't afford something right away. Like, lady, you're the parent. Just say no. Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger yet, but a kind of clarity I'd never felt before. I looked at these three young people, my children, my world, my everything, and realized they saw me as nothing more than a source of money and goods. Not as a person who had feelings, needs, or dreams of her own. I thought about the last time any of them had asked how my day was, or noticed when I was tired or sad. I couldn't remember. I walked back to my bedroom, my mind working in ways it hadn't in years. For 18 years I'd been reactive, responding to their demands, scrambling to meet their needs, apologizing for my limitations. But as I sat on my bed, looking at the stack of bills on my nightstand and the photo of my children on the dresser, I felt something shift inside me. I opened my laptop and began researching. Credit card policies, phone plan cancellations, insurance terminations. I pulled out the folder where I kept all their accounts. Accounts I'd opened in their names but paid for entirely myself. The credit cards I'd given them for emergencies, that they used for shopping sprees. The car insurance for the vehicles I'd co-signed for. The phone plans that cost me $400 a month. Then I did something I'd never done before. I calculated exactly how much I'd spent on them over 18 years. Not just the basics, food, clothing, shelter, but everything extra. The vacations, the electronics, the designer clothes, the restaurant meals, the entertainment, the sports fees, the tutoring, the cars. The number made me dizzy. Including reasonable interest, it was over $50,000 each. Money I'd worked myself to the bone for, money I'd borrowed against my future to provide. Money they now saw as their birthright rather than my sacrifice. I heard them in the kitchen now, finally getting their own dinner since I hadn't called them. Where's Mom? Tiana asked. Probably fell asleep again, Marcus replied dismissively. She's been working a lot lately. Good, Jasmine said. She's been kind of clingy recently. Always asking if we need anything. I smiled grimly and opened my banking app. Time to close the ATM permanently. That night, after my children had gone to bed in their comfortable rooms filled with things I'd bought them, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and began the process of taking back my life. One by one, I canceled their credit cards. Each cancellation felt like removing a weight from my shoulders. Their phone plans were next. 3 lines at $120 each per month, plus unlimited data they used to stream videos and play games while ignoring me. Canceled. The car insurance for Marcus's car and Jasmine's car. Both vehicles I'd co-signed for because their part-time jobs weren't enough to qualify them. Canceled. I thought about my own phone. A 3-year-old model with a cracked screen because I'd prioritized their new devices over my own needs. I thought about my car, which needed new tires I couldn't afford because I'd just paid for their Miami trip. As I worked, I could hear Tiana's music playing through the expensive Bluetooth speaker I'd bought her for her last birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was using something I'd sacrificed for to ignore my existence in my own home. By 2 a.m. I had everything documented. Every account closed, every automatic payment stopped. I'd even called the insurance company and had them remove the kids from my auto policy. Let them figure out how to get to school and work without transportation they couldn't afford to maintain. Then I sat down and wrote 3 identical letters. Bills for 18 years of ATM services, itemized down to the penny. Room and board, calculated at current market rates. Every gift, every vacation, every unnecessary purchase they demanded and received. With interest calculated at standard market rates, just like any other loan. The total for each child, $52,847. I woke up before dawn as I had every day for 18 years, but this morning felt different. I made myself coffee, real coffee, not the instant stuff I usually drank to save money for their expenses, and sat at the table with the 3 envelopes I'd prepared. At 7 a.m., right before they normally left for school, I heard the familiar sounds of my children getting ready. The shower running, Marcus always used all the hot water. The hair dryer, Jasmine's morning routine. The music playing, Tiana getting dressed. Sounds that used to fill me with maternal warmth now seemed foreign, like strangers living in my house. Marcus came down first, grabbing his expensive backpack and heading for the door without a word. "Marcus," I called calmly. "Could you come here for a moment?" He sighed dramatically, the same sigh that used to make me apologize for inconveniencing him. "I'm going to be late, Mom. This won't take long." I handed him the envelope with his name on it. "I have something for you." Jasmine and Tiana came down together and I handed each of them their envelopes as well. They stood there looking confused, probably expecting birthday money or cash for some new want. "Go ahead," I said, sipping my coffee. "Open them." Marcus opened his first and I watched his face change as he read. The color drained from his cheeks and his mouth fell open. What is this?" Jasmine and Tiana were reading theirs now, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief to something approaching panic. "Those are your bills," I said simply. "For 18 years of ATM services. Everything's itemized with interest calculated at current market rates." $52,000? Jasmine's voice cracked as she stared at the paper. "Mom, this is crazy. You can't charge us for being our mother." I looked at her calmly, this daughter I'd worked myself to exhaustion for. "I'm not charging you for being your mother. I'm charging you for being your personal ATM. There's a difference." Tiana started crying first, the same tears that used to manipulate me into buying whatever she wanted. "Mom, please, this isn't fair. We're just kids." "Kids." I laughed and the sound surprised even me. It wasn't bitter or angry, just genuinely amused. "Marcus, you're 15 and told me last week you were mature enough to make your own decisions about everything. Jasmine, you're 17 and constantly remind me that you're almost an adult. Tiana, you're 13 and haven't spoken to me with respect in 2 years." Marcus tried to hand the bill back to me. "I'm not paying this. This is insane." "Oh, you don't have to pay it," I said, taking another sip of coffee. "But you also don't get to use any more ATM services. As of last night, I canceled your credit cards, phone plans, and car insurance. The ATM is permanently out of service." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see them processing this information, trying to figure out if I was serious or if this was some elaborate bluff they could call. "You canceled our phones?" Tiana whispered, pulling her device out of her pocket and seeing the no service message for the first time. "Time to get jobs like your personal slave did to support you all these years," I said, standing up and putting my coffee cup in the sink. The next few hours were chaos. Marcus tried to drive to school only to discover his car insurance had indeed been canceled and he couldn't legally drive. Jasmine attempted to use her credit card at the coffee shop and was humiliated when it was declined in front of her friends. Tiana couldn't even call anyone because her phone had no service. They all came home that afternoon with a different energy than I'd seen from them in years. Gone was the casual dismissiveness, the assumption that I existed solely for their convenience. Instead, they looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time. "Mom," Marcus started, his voice smaller than usual, "can we talk about this?" "Sure," I replied, not looking up from the book I was reading. For the first time in months, I was reading for pleasure instead of collapsing into bed after working double shifts to fund their lifestyle. "We didn't mean what we said last night," Jasmine tried. "We were just talking. Just talking about how I'm your personal ATM who works like a slave and is desperate for your love?" I asked, finally looking at them. "Just talking about how you can manipulate me into buying you anything because I'm gullible?" Their faces went pale. They hadn't realized I'd heard every word. "We didn't mean it like that," Tiana whispered. "Then how did you mean it?" I asked. Because from where I stood, it sounded like you had no respect for me as a person, only as a source of money. It sounded like my feelings, my exhaustion, my sacrifices meant nothing to you as long as I kept providing. The truth hung in the air between us, undeniable and uncomfortable. Over the next few days, my children began to understand what life looked like without their personal ATM. Marcus had to ask his friends for rides and was embarrassed to explain why he couldn't drive his own car. Jasmine couldn't go shopping or even buy lunch at school. Tiana discovered that without her phone and unlimited data, she actually had to interact with people face to face. But something else started to happen too. For the first time in years, they began to really look at me. They noticed that I looked tired, that my work clothes were old and worn, that I'd been eating less so there would be more food for them. "Mom," Jasmine said on Thursday evening, When was the last time you bought yourself something new? I thought about it. I honestly can't remember. But you just bought us all new clothes last month, Marcus said quietly. Yes, I did. With money I should have used to fix my car. They exchanged glances, and I could see them beginning to piece together the reality of our situation. How their mother had been living in poverty while ensuring they lived in luxury. How I'd been sacrificing my own needs, my own dignity, my own future to fund their excessive lifestyle. We could get jobs, Tiana offered tentatively. That would be a good start, I agreed. But first I think we need to talk about respect. About how family members should treat each other. About the difference between being grateful and being entitled. For the first time in years my children sat down and really listened to me. Not because they wanted something, not because they were in trouble, but because they were finally ready to see me as a human being rather than a dispensing machine. We messed up, Marcus said finally. We really messed up. The conversation that followed was the first real one we'd had in years. I told them about working through illness to pay for their wants. About selling my grandmother's jewelry for Tiana's cheerleading. About taking the bus for months so they could have new gaming systems. About the nights I'd gone to bed hungry so they could have seconds at dinner. They cried, real tears this time, not manipulative ones. Jasmine talked about how she'd started to believe she deserved expensive things just for existing. Marcus admitted he'd been embarrassed by my modest lifestyle in front of his friends. Tiana confessed she'd been testing how much she could get away with, pushing boundaries just to see if I'd ever say no. I wanted to give you everything I never had, I told them. But somewhere along the way I forgot to give you the most important things my mother gave me. Respect for hard work, gratitude for what you have, and the understanding that love isn't about what someone can buy for you. Over the following weeks, things changed slowly but surely. Marcus got a job at a local grocery store and started paying for his own gas and car insurance. Jasmine picked up shifts at a clothing store and began to understand the value of earning money. Tiana started babysitting and was shocked to discover how hard it was to earn even $20. They began to offer to help with household chores without being asked. They started saying thank you for meals I cooked and asking how my day was. When Marcus got his first paycheck, he insisted on buying groceries for the family. I can't believe I thought $50 was no big deal, he said, looking at his pay stub. I had to work 6 hours for this. It wasn't easy and it wasn't quick, but gradually we began to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than financial dependency. I got my own phone plan back, but made them earn their way back onto it by demonstrating responsibility and contributing to household expenses. They had to save up for their own car insurance before they could drive again. This took Marcus 3 months of working part-time, and during that time he gained a new appreciation for how much it had cost me to maintain 2 vehicles for teenagers who barely thanked me. The most significant change was in how we communicated. Instead of demands disguised as requests, they started asking genuinely for help when they needed it. Instead of assuming I would provide everything they wanted, they began to distinguish between needs and wants. Mom, Jasmine said one evening, I've been saving for a new dress for homecoming, but I'm still $30 short. Could I do extra chores this week to earn it from you? It was the first time in years she'd offered to work for something she wanted rather than simply expecting it to be given to her. Tiana surprised me by using her babysitting money to buy me a small potted plant. I noticed you always buy us flowers but never get any for yourself, she said shyly. These small gestures meant more to me than all the expensive gifts I'd ever bought them, because they came from genuine care rather than obligated reciprocity. We still had setbacks. Old habits die hard and sometimes they'd slip back into entitled behavior. But now I had the tools and the confidence to address it immediately rather than enabling it. 6 months later, our family dynamic had completely transformed. My children had learned to value money because they earned it themselves. They'd learned to appreciate what I provided because they understood the work it required. Most importantly, they'd learned to see me as a person with needs, feelings, and limitations rather than an endless source of material goods. I was able to start saving money for the first time in years. I fixed my car, bought myself some new clothes, and even started taking a night class I'd been wanting to take for years. My children not only supported these decisions but insisted on contributing to the household so I could have these opportunities. The bill I'd given them was never paid in money, but it was paid in respect, gratitude, and genuine relationship. They understood now that the real debt they'd owed wasn't financial. It was emotional and relational. Marcus got accepted to college with a partial scholarship and has a plan for paying for the rest himself. Jasmine is working to save money for her own car and has learned to budget her expenses carefully. Tiana helps me with dinner every night and has started planning to earn money for her own school activities. But the most important change is that they love me now, not for what I can give them but for who I am. And I love them not as extensions of myself that I need to provide for endlessly, but as individuals who are learning to be responsible, grateful, and kind. Mom, Tiana said to me last week, I'm proud of you for standing up to us. We needed that. Sometimes the greatest act of love is teaching people, even your own children, that you are worthy of respect. The ATM might be out of service, but our family is finally working perfectly.